As has been our tradition, we begin the ceremony in your voice with a member of the graduating class whom you have selected to speak, Class President Sean Hassan. I've had the privilege to know Sean since the first day of law school, and over the past 3 years have observed the tremendous impact he's had on the school and on his fellow students. Sean arrived at law school with an already firm commitment to giving back. He came to us having spent several years teaching at the high school where he went and running a nonprofit providing services and programming for Muslim youth. In the latter position, he apparently discovered his skills for leadership and organization because he put them to extraordinarily good use here at Stanford. Last year, for example, Sean helped coordinate a group of lawyers, fellow students, and staff at Bay Area Legal Aid to spearhead significant changes in our domestic violence program. And after the earthquake in Haiti, Sean and another student leader handled logistics, funding, and training arrangements for an alternative spring break trip to Miami, helping refugees obtain temporary protected status. When he saw that too many potential clients didn't know about the clinic, he organized an outing to Miami's Little Haiti to spread the word, making the trip a huge success for the student volunteers and, more importantly, for the many clients they assisted. These are but a few examples of the many, many ways in which Sean has affected the law school community for the better. Everything from organizing a massive Halloween trick-or-treating event for families in East Palo Alto, to making the American Constitution Society one of the most active and successful student organizations on campus. Sean is an amazing person, fun, funny, friendly, hardworking, ambitious, and of course smart. I'm delighted to invite him up here to speak to and for you.
My fellow graduates, faculty and staff, family and friends, good morning. I suspect, like many of you in the audience, I was very relieved when, on May 21st, contrary to all predictions, the world did not indeed come to an end. Apparently, the forecasters had the date wrong, and so rumor has it that there is a new revised date for sometime in the near future. There is a silver lining, however. Moments from now, we'll be receiving our law degree. And so long as the world comes to an end rather soon, we get the law degree without any of the debt and without having to study for the bar exam. Those of you who know me well know that I'm a man of many words. It's true. And despite my best efforts, today is going to be no exception. So enjoy the sun, enjoy the tan, and settle in. At the risk of sounding trite, it really is an honor to have been selected by you, my fellow classmates, to be your voice today. As I've gotten to know so many of you over the past 3 years, I have been reminded of what an amazing job the admissions office did in putting our class together. Our class includes an author who, prior to arriving at SLS, published a book on democracy in the Middle East. LLM, JSD, and other international students who are graduating with us today who have worked as law professors in their home countries. An individual who ran a hot dog factory in Costa Rica. Several public school teachers. An organizer of indigenous peoples in Mexico. A colleague who was the lead musician for the band Zox. More than one classmate who courageously risked their lives in Iraq and Afghanistan prior to coming here. And so on, and so on. And so it is indeed humbling to be chosen as your voice today. I come from a modest background. I grew up in a community where, for most of us, Robitussin and Oragel substituted for health insurance and dental exams. When we absolutely needed medical care, like when my brother broke his arm, or my mom and I were hurt in a car accident, we spent long nights and early mornings at Miami's County Hospital, Jackson Memorial, the hospital for those without health insurance. I remember the butterflies I felt every Monday morning as my fourth grade teacher would go through the class roster to collect lunch money for the week. while she would unfailingly and kindly whisper, "Taken care of," that never lifted the embarrassment I felt at having my meals provided by the federal free lunch program. After transferring schools, I found myself in a majority and discovered this because there was a separate line for those of us who had our meals subsidized and paid for by the federal government, and a separate line for those who paid for the meals themselves. Like school children across the country, every August my brother and I made our annual pilgrimage to buy clothes for the upcoming school year. Each year, without fail, I'd make some excuse to my mom about needing to look for some item in some aisle as far away from the line that she was standing in, suggesting I'd return soon, all to avoid the humiliation of standing in the layaway line at Kmart. So like so many of you, I came to law school to give voice to people who could not always speak for themselves, to give voice to the people who sat beside me in those emergency rooms at Jackson Memorial and who stood next to me in those lines in the lunchroom. I know others of you were also inspired by your own experiences, whether as someone who's been inflicted with an illness that has debilitated and demoralized countless others, as a pre-adolescent who moved to this country with no knowledge of English, not to mention no money, or a teenager who not only had to wrestle with all of the things that all teens struggle with, but also had to worry that you would be judged, condemned, and harassed for being who you are. Over the past few years, Stanford Law has made it possible for so many of us to give voice to the voiceless and the vulnerable. Over the past few years, members of our class sitting in front of you today have represented kitchen workers and auto mechanics, housekeepers and day laborers to recover thousands of dollars in back wages and overtime pay, which were illegally withheld by unscrupulous employers. The financial and housing crises revealed that working folk, many of whom of limited English proficiency, were duped into refinancing homes in which they had spent years building equity and then found themselves unable to make the next mortgage payment. Our classmates sitting in this audience today represented those folks who were at risk of being evicted or foreclosed upon. Students sitting in this audience today have fought deportation proceedings, which, had those deportations occurred, would have left children in this country without a parent and without a means of support, moving them from an already precarious situation to almost certain poverty. As county mental health departments and school districts fought over who was responsible for paying the bill, elementary-age students with severe mental and emotional disabilities were left without services that they were entitled to under the law. Students sitting in front of you today represented those children and their parents. We have secured Social Security benefits for veterans, restraining orders for domestic violence victims, and legal status for refugees from Iraq and victims of the earthquake in Haiti. And students sitting in this audience today have secured the release of individuals who, under California's 3 strikes law, had served 14 and 16 years for crimes that even the judges who sentenced them believed in retrospect were far too harsh for the crime committed and for the circumstances surrounding the crime. One client's 3rd strike came when he was arrested while trying to return pants he hadn't paid for. His prior convictions were for 2 nonviolent burglaries, which he had committed on the same day 13 years earlier when he was 18 years old. In the 3rd instance for which he was arrested, he was trying to return the pants in order to buy a car seat so he could take his newborn daughter home from the hospital. California law requires that parents have a car seat before they are allowed to leave the hospital with a newborn. Had it not been for our classmates sitting in this audience today, he would still be in prison on a sentence of 25 years to life. I'm not diminishing the importance of following the law, but I am submitting that our classmates facilitated an outcome that was in line with prudence, a more fundamental notion of fairness and compassion. What I have shared with you is only a fraction of the efforts that have been undertaken over the past 3 years on behalf of those whose voices would not have otherwise been heard. The challenge for us, for those of us receiving our degrees today, is to continue this commitment when we don't have the Mills Legal Clinic or the Levin Center facilitating our efforts, and when we have countervailing pressures of billable hours and other responsibilities that make such a commitment all that more difficult. Today, of course, is not just a day for us to reflect on our accomplishments. It is also a day for us to recognize those who have made those accomplishments possible. First, the teachers. I, like so many of you, have benefited from wonderful teachers going back to my days in kindergarten. And with people like Bill Koski, Betsy De La Vega, Diane Chin, and too many others to name, the past few years have been no exception. For the significant others in the audience, I, like some of you, came to law school with a significant other, my wife Zara, whose unstinting work for food sovereignty in developing countries and foster children in San Francisco I respect deeply. I love you, honey. I think she's over there. Others have picked up significant others while they were here in law school. So for all of the craziness that we have put you through during the last 3 years, and for all the craziness before then, the LSATs and the law school applications, I think we owe all of our significant others a round of applause. And finally, our families, and in particular our parents and those who raised us. I am the son of a young lady who came to this country when she was 24 years old, a bit younger than most of us who are graduating today. Although she was a teacher in her home country, with no support system, and in an effort to secure status in this country, she ran a laundromat. She worked 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, standing on her feet the entire time, washing clothes, mopping the floor, and doing whatever else it took to run that laundromat. She transitioned from a laundromat to a dry cleaner, which meant the same hours, but now with the fumes of cleaning chemicals lingering in the air and the steam of the pressers combining with the Miami humidity to create something the equivalent of a sauna for a workplace every day. At the end of those long and taxing days, day after day, year after year, she would come home and without exception or a hint of impatience, sit with my younger brother and I for hours, encouraging me to explore my interest in history and government by helping me to complete extra credit book reports, listening to me as I practiced my campaign speeches for 4th grade class president, and buying my brother and I our first trophies for achieving the summer reading targets she set for us. She was so committed to ensuring that there wasn't a single opportunity that we didn't avail, that she would often return to work late into the night on Fridays and Saturdays, long after the dry cleaner was closed, if she had taken time away earlier that day or week to attend a school play or to shuttle me to a debate tournament. Perhaps as important as anything, she taught by example, somehow finding the time to volunteer helping elderly immigrants in need of health care, and as I was entering high school, going to school to become a nurse, and I would note serving as the graduation speaker at her graduation. So to all the foster parents, the step parents, the grandparents, the parents we lost before we started here at Stanford, the parents who during our time here have courageously fought off disease, and all other types of parents and caregivers, we thank you and we love you. I told you it wasn't going to be short. Finally, if you'll indulge me for a moment, if I'm not mistaken, I believe I am the only Muslim in the graduating JD class of some 180 students. I know that you are not the audience that needs to hear this, but I hope that in reminding you of this, I will encourage you and remind you to educate others. My commitment to social justice and human dignity is rooted as much in my faith as it is in my life experience. The central messages of the Islam I have grown up with and continue to practice are quite simple. Difference, including religious differences, are not merely to be tolerated, but encouraged and celebrated, as it is through difference that we learn from one another. As God's representative on this planet, we are stewards of our natural environment. And finally, the ethics of compassion, sharing, and respect for life demand that we all gather all of the effort, creativity, and intellect that we can muster and vigorously act to care for the weakest among us. That is the Islam that I know. That said, That said, I end with this. As Dean Kramer mentioned last year in the aftermath of the earthquake in Haiti, about a dozen of us from here at Stanford Law School, with the help of the Dean's Office and the Levin Center, headed to Miami to help Haitians living here in the US apply for the ability to work legally in the United States. As has been the case on previous occasions where a natural disaster of the scope of the Haiti earthquake or instance of significant civil strife, the US government will sometimes offer something sort of an amnesty for nationals of that country to avoid having to deport them back to a condition that may be inhumane on the ground. And they do this so in part these individuals can send back money and help rebuild the countries that they've come from. As we were doing outreach in Little Haiti and at Jackson Memorial Hospital, I met a lady by the name of Marie Baptiste, who was there with her son Peter. We explained to Marie what the program was all about. She was understandably very reluctant to share what is obviously very private and sensitive information about her legal status with folks she had just met several minutes earlier. She was also baffled by the idea that anyone would be willing to help her with her immigration paperwork for free. A couple of us shared with her the fact that we were the children of people like her, who like her were not born in this country, and therefore we could relate somewhat to where she was coming from. With some more persistence, we were able to convince her to work with us. Over the course of nearly 2 full days, as we completed her application, we went through a stack of paper inches thick. We came across copies of money order after money order that Marie had sent to immigration services year after year. And year in and year out, on a very limited income, she paid good money to immigration services, a few $100s each year in application fees, fingerprints, and so on. And each year she would receive a letter rejecting her application. Because she couldn't read, much less read English, she had no idea why her application was being rejected. On a number of occasions, she went to a local notario, someone who was not a lawyer but who purports to be able to give advice on immigration matters. Because the fees that immigration attorneys charge are beyond the reach of what so many can afford, many like Marie turn to notarios, still paying them hundreds of dollars. It was apparent to us that Marie got nothing for her money, which is in part why she might have been so reluctant to trust us. Marie's son, Peter, must have been 8 or 9 years old and was with her the entire time. This was a school day. Peter did not speak, nor did he sign. If he needed to get his mother's attention, he would make a sound. If he saw something that amused him, he giggled profusely. Every few minutes, mucus would ooze uncontrollably from his nose, far more than anything you'd ever see when you're sick. So towards the end of the second day, when we were a little more comfortable, I asked Marie what the matter was with Peter. And as best as I could understand from her limited English and from my limited understanding of anything even remotely scientific, the mucus was filling his ear canal as well, which was limiting his ability to hear and, I guess, to speak. To this day, I'm convinced that the ailment was something relatively easy to fix. In any case, at the end of the 2 days, we realized that Marie did not have passport pictures, so we drove her down to a Walgreens down the block. When we returned in the minivan that we had driven her in, she asked the few of us who were there as students if she could stay in the car with Peter for a couple of minutes. She had to change his diaper. If this was an issue spotting exam to identify all of the failures of the system, all of the areas in need, and all of the opportunities for positive change, it would be an easy one. In any case, a few weeks later, we would receive the good news that Marie, along with nearly 24 others, was granted her legal status, her work permit. We did a lot of good work during our time there, but it was clear that much work remained to be done. That night, as she and Peter left a restaurant that we were working in out of Little Haiti to catch their bus home, in her heavy Creole accent, Marie turned to us and said, "I pray to God to bless you all. I pray to God to bless your families." I can't think of a better way to conclude. Thank you again for this honor. God bless you and your families.